Warning, this podcast contains heavy spoilers for not just one movie, but entire franchises. We highly recommend going and watching these movies before listening to us as a companion piece that stitches all the timelines into one creepy, crime-ridden story. There will be no more spoiler warnings. We do not break character. After this, there is no turning back. You've been warned. Hit the music.
You are talking about the nonsensical ravings of a lunatic mind.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
On a new sport. I'm conflicted about it. I don't know, because there's been a lot of, if you look back in their history, it hasn't been the nicest history in terms of the horses.
Yeah.
Well, but I think that's the same with any fucking horse racing sport, horse sport, like horse racing and all that. They break their leg, they instantly put them.
I don't think they have to do that anymore. I think that there's.
Yeah, but those Texans seem hardcore, man. I was reading about it, and up until maybe 2 or 3 years ago, there was a fair amount of horses put down at these things. We're looking at the Calgary Stampede Rodeo, and I will tell you now, I reckon it's more dangerous for the rider than it is the animal. Maybe the steer wrestling is a bit much.
Oh, but that's where they were put down from, isn't it?
What?
The steer wrestling is what injured the horses. That was like to take apart the steer wrestling.
Not really. Because
not the steer wrestling. Sorry, it's the racing. I thought you said, yeah.
It's the what do you
call it?
Oh, it's basically like the sulky racing, but they have a different name. They have some kind of fucking cart name for it, but
cart racing?
Something like that. Something box racing. I don't know, but it's they have an awful lot of crashes in it that kind of lead to the horses dying. But when it comes to the actual main show, it's definitely those guys who do the saddleless horse riding.
That's the fun one.
Yeah, they get flopped around fucking hardcore, man. And we've seen a few of them not wear the neck protection, and it's like, how are you doing that without dying? Like, you're being flopped back. I think
maybe if you've got a short neck and big shoulders, you're kind of fine.
We have noticed that there has been a few of these kind of fucking no neck dudes coming up. Guys are all head and shoulders. But they get flopped around like they're like rag dolls on top of it. Like, it's crazy.
Imagine biting your tongue by mistake. You'd have no tongue left.
Oh, fuck. You'd have to be concussed coming off that fucking horse most of the time. And then they get the Broncos out, and they're like fucking giant horses, and they do it in them. And then just as the main event, one more go around, we got the bull riding. That's good fun. I'm still waiting for them to get nabbed by the bull riding. It's fun to watch. I don't know, is it ethical or good or whatever. I'm sure they got plenty of animal rights.
What to be nabbed? Nabbed by the bull rider.
Oh yeah, I want to see one of them get caught by the bull.
Oh, they have their horns.
Just a bit of a chase.
Though? Their horns are blood. Their horns are blood.
But a little bit of a chase. The kids one is funny.
I love the kids one.
Because the kids are like, they're teams of 3. And they
first one to mount.
That's it. You have an anchor. So they have the bull by a rope already. They're baby bulls, like. Or they're they're small horses, aren't they?
Oh, they are. That's it.
Small horses. And they have the horse already wrangled. Like, so it's already got the rope on it.
Yeah.
And the horse will just take off running. And the 3 kids, one has to be the anchor who holds it at the back. Then you got the middle one who's kind of trying to direct the horse while the front one is trying to get on top of the horse.
But do you remember the horse that got out that it was a team of little boys and like literally within 3 seconds?
They were on it.
I was like, holy shit. The rest of them were getting dragged along. And they're having the time of their lives.
I love it.
I think I prefer getting dragged along for a while than getting on top straight away.
Well, I've seen
those
kids ones though. I've seen the horses like where, the person who's supposed to be trying to get on the horse to ride it.
Yeah.
That they're only holding onto the rope and they're being dragged along, and as they start to loosen up, those horse hoofs are coming down on those kids. Like, I suppose, yeah. No, the kids are padded up.
They're wearing fucking hurling helmets. There's fear there.
Yeah. But it's a mental sport. But I don't know how they can fucking put those animals down afterwards. I couldn't look at a horse and
couldn't. Especially when horse owners go on about this bond, like the same way that we'd have with dogs, this bond that you have between you and your horse.
And what is their logic behind putting down horses that have broken legs?
I don't know.
Is it just that they won't run anymore, so they're useless, or is it that they can't heal?
That's what I always thought it was, but then I don't take as in like I read somewhere at some stage in the last few years that there was new technology that kind of like stimulates it, like
boots
so.
On our fucking foot now, with all the casting and crutches, and surely they can figure out some way to.
But I wonder how is it supposed to keep its weight off it? Like I don't think a horse is supposed to lie down for long.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's look more into that one.
Does it not get colic if it lies down?
What?
Colic. Colic can kill a horse. Like what? Stomach issues.
Oh, okay.
Gastroenterological issues. Like in The Sopranos, I'm pretty sure it had colic.
The stomach was all twisted up or something. And
Exactly.
An operation
I don't know why it's in my head that if a horse is like, maybe it lies down if it has. I don't know. There's some correlation there between colic and a horse and lying down.
Okay, so maybe they have a reason for doing it. I don't know. I have to look into it a bit more. But it just always seems so fucking cruel to me. You know? From horses to apes, so this week. Now, I'm going to admit, right, when it comes to this conspiracy stuff, it can get a little bit muddled up and hard to put it all together. I think I've done a good job, but I will admit so much work went into the last 2 scripts that I didn't have time to read back over it since I've written it. So I'm just hoping, I'm praying today.
It all makes sense.
That it all makes sense. And
I read the first one and the second one. I think it makes sense.
Well, let's find out. Hello and welcome to It's a Live Alive Podcast. This is a true crime, paranormal, interstellar podcast covering unbelievable stories that sound like they were ripped straight from the pages of a Hollywood script. I'm your host, the man of many names, the outlaw, Harley, Ray, the Bruiser, Bronson, Dr. HR, Smoking Steam, THC, or you can call me Josh for short. And with me, as always, is my very own Scream Queen, the perfect combination of beauty and brains, the brightest smoking India, hard extras, guts and gore, the gorgeous, sexy Aimee Rose.
Hi.
And again, also, people will notice I said the next 2 scripts. We thought this would be a 2-parter, and it's stretched into 3 because I fucking read everything. Everything.
In fairness to you, Dave.
I watched everything. I read everything. Well, I'll list them later on, I'm pretty sure, but it was just too much to squeeze into 1 episode. So it ended up getting split into 2, which means my week off got taken away from me.
You have a week off.
My 2 weeks off turned into 1 week off.
Sorry.
And instead of 2 Aimee episodes, you get 1 Aimee episode. So they're losing out on you too. So I mean, I've taken away from them. But I promise, I really worked hard in this, and this is, I think, some of my more fun, better work. But yeah, we're gonna do as much as we can today, and then save the rest for next week.
Well, in fairness, we do want to keep it to about 60 to 90 minutes. And we do go a bit longer than that sometimes, but I think about 60 to 90 minutes even is a sweet spot.
Yeah, otherwise I'm just trying to cram information in and you're overloading the listeners. So maybe we look at the first leader of Apeology today, or as much of his stories we can fit in today, and then finish his tale and talk about the second leader in the big downfall and ensuing siege next week. Exciting. Giving me another full week of Apeology research and Planet of the Apes dreams, which are really fun if I'm being honest.
They sound funny too, in fairness.
So fuck it, let's get into it. We got a lot of ground to cover. Dr. Ulysses Moreau Zaius was born March 13, 1923 to Ross and May Zaius. Ross, being an army airman, meant that Zaius' early life was generally spent travelling the country and sometimes the world as the family followed Captain Ross Zaius from airbase to airbase.
I always wondered if that would be a fun childhood or if you get absolutely sick shit of it.
Shawn Michaels was brought up that way. And he said it's hard, like, cause you make friends and then you're
gone
out
from
and
them
you're
again.
moving on to the next one, you know, so you never really get to put down roots, which I'm about to say right now. As you can imagine, this made putting down roots very, virtually impossible. Leading Zaius to become a bit of a loner. In fact, it was this nomadic lifestyle in his formative years that drew Zaius to the world of sci-fi and fantasy. His favourite writer is one I enjoy myself, and H.G. Wells, and the 2 stories that inspired him the most, which we will see for ourselves a little later, is The Time Machine and War of the Worlds. The latter was obviously a bit of a phenomenon during Zaius' time by causing mass panic amongst the unsuspecting people of the east coast of the United States. I love this. Have you ever listened to the original War of the Worlds? I don't know how anyone could have gotten confused.
Yeah.
they were taking commercial breaks every 10 to 15 minutes or so, and they announced as they left and returned from commercial that the show was an audio drama adaptation of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. So I don't know why the fuck people were so confused.
Yep, radio programming charts in Sunday newspapers listed The War of the Worlds. On October 30th, 1938, the New York Times included the show on its leading events of the week and published a photograph of Wells with some of the Mercury players, captioned, "Tonight's show is H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds." Announcements that The War of the Worlds is a dramatisation of a work of fiction were made on the full CBS network at 4 points during the broadcast, at the beginning, before the middle break, after the middle break, and at the end. The middle break was delayed 10 minutes to accommodate the dramatic content, alright, but that's about all that was out of the ordinary.
But I'll tell you now, there were so many breaks that it got annoying when I was listening to the podcast version of it. I was like, for fuck's sake, another break, man.
But we think that when we're watching American TV anyway.
And I couldn't understand it. I was like, how are these people getting confused? If you listen for more than,
Yep. And another announcement was repeated on the full CBS network that same evening at 10:30 p.m. and 11:30 p.m. and at midnight it was read as follows. For those listeners who tuned into Orson Welles' Mercury Theatre on the air, broadcast from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight and did not realise that the programme was merely a modernised adaptation of H.G. Wells' famous novel, War of the Worlds, we are repeating the fact which was made clear 4 times on the programme that, while the names of some American cities were used, as in all novels and dramatisations, the entire story of all its incidents were fictitious.
You think a lot of people just heard like 5 minutes of what was going on and then, went and got the pitchforks and torches?
Probably. I mean, if you were to just hear 5 minutes, could you be fooled? You listen to it. Like, what do you think?
I suppose out of context you hear a clip, maybe you could be fooled, but I don't think...
Do you think that maybe radio signals weren't that good? So maybe you were getting like 5 clips here, like 5 minute clips here and there, like...
I think that's possible. I think, this is me. When it comes to, I probably run out once to have a look in the sky and see what's anything happening. And then I'd come back in and I'd be stuck to the radio and be like, we got to stay here and listen to what they tell us to do. Do we know what's further instructions? Here are these things getting any bit closer to us? Do we need to be freaked out? Do we need to go hide? So yeah, I'd probably just be stuck to the radio to see what's going on. I'd last more than fucking 10 minutes before I'd start.
Oh, well, yeah, I'd want to see if it was
burning
legit.
Buildings down and screaming down the street.
If your neighbour starts doing it, are you going to start thinking, do you know that kind of way, does it spread like that?
Oh, mass hysteria. I don't know how bad it was. I think it's just people got a bit scared, a bit upset, but I don't think that
people not go selling shit and stuff.
I have no idea. I don't think so. I don't think it got as bad as we were led to believe as kids. Yeah. Because as kids, you see this. I mean, Animaniacs did a take on this.
Fucking madness.
Other cartoons done takes on it, and it's like people lost their fucking mind.
Yeah.
The Time Machine. That's one of your favorites, isn't it? You've been on to me to watch that for ages, but I just can't take Samantha Mumba seriously.
That's because it's not the Samantha Mumba one that is 1960 Time Machine.
Whatever about Samantha Mumba, I definitely can't take. What the fuck's her brother's name? Omarion, Omario, or...
Is it not Oreo or...
Oreo?
No, Oreo. No, is it not?
I don't think so.
Not Oreo, that's fucking... It is. Or Amro.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know. I can't remember his name. I remember Samantha, but I only remember him from the Late Late Toy Show, maybe once.
I think he had like one single and he was in Time Machine and maybe one other movie that I know of. I haven't heard shit about him since.
I'm trying to look for his name.
He's got to be like older than us now.
No, he would be. He's not younger than us.
No, he would have been our age or a little, maybe a year or two older when we were kids. Because he would have been about the same time we were kids watching The Den.
Yeah?
Well, where did you find him?
Yeah, it's Omero is his first name. And he was born... No, he's about our age. He was born in 1989.
What's he do now?
35. He is an Irish actor, writer, and director.
Doing what?
I'm looking. He had Little Big Man in 2002.
Right, look, that's enough about the Mumbas. As you can imagine,
but the 1960 Time Machine is absolutely 100% a fucking classic, and it's worth the watch.
I've only seen reference to it in The Big Bang Theory, but it looks cool enough. All right,
we should do a double bill of a Time Machine and Logan's Run.
2 I haven't seen. 2 classics, sci-fi classics I haven't seen.
You have to watch them.
Anyway, as you can imagine, growing up in a military family, odds are your parents are going to be pretty strict. I was saying, aren't going to be pretty strict. They're fucking strict, those military parents. So although Zaius had a love for the more fantastical storylines found in the strips like Buck Rogers, his father felt such things were childish and did nothing to progress Zaius as a man. In fact, it was fairly well known on the basis just how disappointed Ross Zaius was in his son's development. Although bright, Zaius was a chronic underachiever in education, and physically he wasn't your typical military jock type. Naturally chunky, something he got from his father's side because his mother's family are all known to be stick thin.
What a dick thing to do to a child, like, especially if you grew up a little on the heavier side yourself. Like, he knows what it's like to be picked on for your weight, and he thinks doing the same thing to his own son is a good motivator, like.
But if you ask him, it's exactly for that reason he did what he did. His logic is he was ridiculed as a child for his weight, and he used those insults to motivate himself into becoming a finely tuned killing machine he is today. Plus, if he hit the kid with the insults early, maybe he could correct his behaviour, which is something I'm going to say a lot in the next 2 episodes, and his relationship with food.
Yep. And how did it work out?
Oh, Zaius stayed heavy.
Yeah.
Hated his father, moved away from home at 16 years of age after one more heated argument that the men had over the younger Zaius' future.
But you're just going to eat your emotion.
Yeah, well, they both dealt with it different ways. The father ended up becoming a military man and, stayed fit all his life, whereas Zaius went the complete opposite direction.
Do you think that maybe the father went harder than what he had received because of that? Like, thinking that the harder that he went
pushed him too far and caused all this that we're about to talk about. He, like many kids before him, looked to the Big Apple as the place to carve out a future. Here in New York, he would eventually buy an island, which he christened Ape Island, and from there he would run his now government-sanctioned religion, Apeology, all based off his series of science fiction books, The Planet of the Apes. In this series, you have the title book, The Planet of the Apes, and its sequels, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, and later, when the religion was already in full swing, the books Escape from the Planet of the Apes, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, and Battle for the Planet of the Apes would follow. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. Zaius worked odd jobs his first year in New York City and eventually decided he was going to follow his passion and enrolled in journalism and creative writing classes. There he learned how to polish his writing and develop his ideas into more fleshed out and full worlds. Something he would later rely heavily on when mastering the art of deception that saw the inception of his own creed. Upon receiving his diploma, Zaius got work from the PM newspaper in New York, generally writing fluff pieces and obituaries.
Starting from the bottom, like the way every job works. Like.
He didn't mind anyway. Yeah. He was only working there to finance his sci-fi novels.
At what point does he go to medical school, or is he a doctor in literature?
He's about as much of a doctor as I am. The title was self-proclaimed, something he started to call himself around the time he claimed to have discovered the de-evolution of man, or the devolution of man. Sorry, I keep saying de-evolution. It's devolution.
I can see what devolution, yeah.
I mean, after the church is formed, his title would become Chief Defender of the Faith, but the doctor title still stuck.
Doctor Chief Defender.
So while he worked away at the newspaper by day, he toiled away at his first book by night. And in 1963, it was published by a French publishing company by the name of Edition Juilliard. In the UK, the book was called Monkey Planet for the first few years. I love that.
What a literal way of translating it. Like.
Until the sequel book came out, apparently Beneath Monkey Planet didn't have the same ring as Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Because none of them are fucking monkeys.
Well, that's true too. So, to get them all under one title, all future prints of Monkey Planet, I'm going to say it every time that way, was retitled A Planet of the Apes, like they were everywhere else in the world.
That usually only happens if someone in the country has rights to the name already. Like, I wonder if someone in England had a Planet of the Apes title trademarked. Gotta look into that a bit deeper. But like, it is common. I mean, we all call Walker's Crisps here, and they call Lay's chips. And Lynx body spray is Axe in the States. And that.
Yeah. Why it was called Monkey Planet in the UK, I don't know, but it was a moderate success, pulling in a fairly loyal cult following.
Almost foreshadowing where this would all lead.
I know, creepy, right? So I read all the books in preparation for this episode, even all the fringe books like Exile from the Planet of the Apes, Beware of the Planet of the Apes, Betrayal of the Planet of the Apes, Planet of the Apes Visionaries, and Planet of the Apes Cataclysm.
Why are they seen as fringe books? Like, are they not all parts of the one religion?
Apeism was built on the word of Zaius and Zaius alone while he was alive. After his death, he passed the church leadership over to the next in command, former Colonel John Wesley McCullough, who we will talk about in the next episode. In death, Zaius would actually be promoted to the head of the church as the lawgiver, passing his own title on to McCullough. All other writings, such as the ones listed above, aren't seen as canon to Apeology. They were written by a man who formed a more passive splinter group of the church by the name of Gabriel Alaron.
So those books would basically be seen as the Gospels that the church don't let into the Bible?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, pretty much.
Okay. And how did he get a post-mortem promotion then?
But Apeologists still to this day don't believe he's dead.
Okay.
But again, we're jumping ahead of ourselves, and none of it will make any sense if I don't give you the book's outlines. Okay. This is a bit more, but we're okay. All right. In a frame story, a rich couple sailing in space, Jin and Phyllis, rescue and translate a manuscript from a floating bottle. The manuscript...
Up in space.
Huh?
Up in space.
Up in space.
Okay.
Up in space, yes. The manuscript was written by George Taylor, a New York City journalist who in 2500 was invited by Professor Antel to accompany him and his disciple, physician Arthur Levane, to Betelgeuse.
Beetlejuice.
Huh?
Beetlejuice.
What about Beetlejuice?
That's Beetlejuice.
Yeah?
Beetlejuice.
Is that how it's pronounced, or am I saying it right?
No.
I'm saying it right. What?
It's Beetlejuice.
I don't know what you're trying to say
I'm
to
telling
me.
you,
here.
you pronounce
and
it
if you say
as
it too many more
Beetlejuice.
times, it's going to show up here. So shut the
Get my
fuck
feet here. No. I am 100%, 99.9% certain that is Beetlejuice. That's how you pronounce it.
That's how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
See, I was just going off of Portuguese and then seeing the geese at the end, and I was like, well, Betelgeuse seems about
Oh my
right.
God, have I been pronouncing this wrong all my life and calling it Beetlejuice?
I don't have to say it that many more times, so let's not worry about it. It's a red supergiant star in the constellation of Orion. Because of time dilation, now again, remember, this is not science, this is a science fiction book that became, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because of time dilation, centuries pass on Earth during their 2 years in transit. They land their shuttle on a temperate, lushly forested planet, which they name Soror.
And turn into a tourist destination.
Which was Latin for sister. So they basically said it's like Earth, but it's the sister planet to Earth.
Okay.
And they call it Soror. Soror, yeah. Attracted by a naked woman, as we all are, whom they call Nova, they swim below a waterfall. Well, not all of us. I suppose some of us have different things. But she is frightened by their pet chimpanzee, Hector, and strangles it. Her tribe, who exhibit the behavior of dumb animals, wreck the newcomers' clothing and shuttle. Gorillas dressed as big game hunters attack the tribe with firearms, and many are killed, including Arthur. So our Arthur is the physician that came along with George Taylor and Professor Antel.
Okay.
Where was I? Oh yeah. Taylor is captured and brought to a city populated by, you guessed it, apes. The apes smoke tobacco, photograph their hunting trophies, drink through straws, which they seem to think was amazing, and appear civilized.
Is that not because, I presume every mammal could kind of suck through a straw, couldn't they? Because it's the same
definitely.
as
I
suckling,
feel like
from
I've seen a chimp do that once.
Yeah.
Their society is divided into 3 strata, which would eventually be moved on to the church later. Militaristic gorillas as police and soldiers, conservative orangutans as politicians and religious authorities, and liberal chimpanzees as scientists.
You see, which are the ones that poop in the wild? Because we couldn't have those as politicians.
Chimps, I think.
Yeah, see, there's a reason that they were the scientists.
Aimee. Guy named Hitler had a very similar idea to how the world should be. A lot of
in
people
the
died.
wild now, chimps don't they?
Are you saying the chimps don't deserve a vote just because they throw some poop around?
I never knew they didn't get the
They
vote.
got a scat fetish, so they don't get a vote.
I never said they didn't get a vote. I said it's a good thing that they're not politicians debating.
Oh, they start throwing poop at each other at the part of the debate.
That's what I'm saying.
You're full of shit. She's just after swerving.
Yeah, that's true.
In an urban biological research facility, Taylor Taylor recognizes conditioning methods being used on captured humans. So basically the same kind of thing that we use on gorillas here, is what he's saying. Or chimps here. Did he do tests on gorillas here?
You'd like to be the one person. No, fuck that.
He was even mated with this other human he came across, Nova. Curious chimpanzee researcher Zira takes an interest in his geometric drawings and his ability to speak a few Simian words. So he had to learn a whole new language in this book. It's a really interesting book, but it's not very religious. With help from Zira's fiance Cornelius, Taylor makes a speech in front of several thousand apes. He is granted freedom, social prestige, and tailored clothing.
Oh, decent.
Until reverts to primitive humanity in the zoo and is moved to a laboratory for safety where he is mated to a young female. So this isn't really explained in the book a whole pile.
Okay.
Basically, they go to the zoo after the apes realize that this Taylor guy can talk. They go. He tells them about Professor Antel, and they reckon they know where he is, and he's at the zoo. And they go to the zoo, and Taylor goes in, and he sees him. He goes, "That's definitely him." But he's reverted back to feral state.
Okay.
Which will be a big fear in Apeology.
Oh well, yeah.
We'll get to it. Cornelius, an archaeologist, excavates an ancient human city and invites Taylor. An unconscious human lab subject recites from genetic memory, another big thing they have in this thing, the events that led to the fall of human civilization. Humans tamed apes and used them as servants. As apes learned to talk, a cerebral laziness took hold of the humans. Apes took over humans' homes, driving the humans into camps outside of the cities. In the final memory, apes attacked the last human camp. Nova bears Taylor a son named Zaius, who walks and talks at 3 months old.
Jesus.
Fearing for their... I know. Pays to be an apologist.
Yep.
Fearing for their lives, they take the place of the human test subjects in a spaceflight experiment, because all humans look alike to apes, apparently. Taylor and Nova escape without notice and rendezvous with the orbiting ship. So when they came down onto this planet, they actually left their main ship in orbit above and took like a little pod down.
Okay.
So that the feral humans destroyed their pod, and that's why they were stuck down there. But the apes seem to be stuck at a level of being at like the 60s, which would be about the time that Zaius wrote this.
Okay.
And they're not able to progress past it. Just getting out to orbit their planet. They haven't mastered like getting to the moon or anything yet.
So they can go around the planet.
So that's it.
Okay.
Taylor, Nova, and Zaius take the place of 3 experiments. They were using humans instead of apes, because we use apes. So we use chimps to send up there. So they replace them and they go up. But because Cornelius and Zira and a few other apes were helping them out, they were able to change the coordinates to make it look like the shuttle got lost up there, and they just get back onto their ship and head off back to their world.
Okay.
And again, because they're going backwards, the time thing starts to work again, and by the time he gets back, it's something like 500 human years have passed or something like that.
Okay.
So, Ulysses Taylor programs the ship back to Earth. As they fly over Paris, Orly Airport, is that an airport? Orly?
Yeah.
And the Eiffel Tower look the same. Then they land, however, they are greeted by a field officer in a jeep who is a gorilla. Horrified, Taylor and Nova take off in their ship, leaving Earth behind. Taylor then writes his manuscript as a record of what has happened, placed it in a bottle, and cast it to space. In the frame story, it is revealed that Jin and Phyllis are chimpanzees. They discard Taylor's story as fantasy because they find the idea of intelligent humans unbelievable.
But they found an old city, a human city.
That's what's in the story that they found. See, it's like a myth. It's a story within a story. So they're finding this manuscript, so they don't have no proof of this. The only proof of this is Taylor's manuscript.
Okay.
So to them, the way Zaius is framing this is as if the...
So this is Taylor's story, writing about them finding...
This will be explained more later when we find... When Zaius passes on, this is explained a lot better as to why all this is the way it is.
Okay.
Even though it's fucking ridiculous. But it's a really good science fiction book. It is not a very good science fact. But to be fair, I mean, like, Riley keeps asking me these same questions lately. Riley's a fucking 10-year-old who's into conspiracies, ancient aliens.
Oh, yeah.
But he is obsessed with the idea that there's a chance that there could have been an ancient civilization before the dinosaurs. Because at this point, it would be so wiped out that we'd find no evidence of it. How do we know that there wasn't something here before everything we've historically documented? Before historical time, how do we know there wasn't something else here beforehand? Is his question to me, and I keep saying we don't know. And the reason we don't exclaim that there was is because we have no proof there was, and we have proof as far back as the dinosaurs, and that's a bunch, you know?
Yeah, they don't have I mean, like, I think we were talking in one of the Mini Monsters episodes about skulls being found, you know, placed as a hoax to mammoths that at a time, like, they did coexist, but like way back farther than they should have, like, you know. So I mean, like, there's no evidence one way or the other, so you can't. That's it.
It's like it's a fun theory. Like I said, them conspiracy theories are fun to think about and talk about, but
don't get labeled as the crazy person.
Yeah, and you can't win with a conspiracy. If, like I said to you a million times before, a conspiracy theory will be a conspiracy theory forever until it's proven right. Because you can never prove it wrong, because conspiracy theorists won't let it be proven wrong.
Oh, yeah.
It'll always be the man trying to hold it down. So you know, you just have to take it for what it is sometimes.
Exactly.
So 2 years later, Zaius would release his less popular but still cult classic, Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Do they go underground?
We'll see. Where again another man named Brent from Earth's past would land in the same geographical location as Taylor's crew and would run into the same apes from the first one. He'd even think of the same name for his love interest in the story, Nova. So
he's just a bit of a one-hit wonder then?
Just in the setup. He changes things up then and shows us what became of humanity in a post-apocalyptic world. Okay. But you always notice that the Americans, when they write their religion, like you have the same thing with Mormons, they make America the central land. I mean, like, of all the places, even with your UFOs, it's like, why are all UFOs coming to America? Why aren't they coming everywhere else? Like, why aren't they landing everywhere else? Why is it always America? And it's the same here. It's like, the Mormons, it's like, oh yeah, Jesus is coming back, and guess what? He's coming to America. It
sounds like the next Mormon movie.
Starring Eddie Murphy. Coming to America Tree. But, yeah, in Mormonism, America is supposed to be the promised land. It's supposed to be the religious promised land, and when Jesus comes back, it will be in America, and he will go from there. But it seems to be the same thing here. Fucking, let alone does Taylor crash in this place, but Brent goes crashing right in the exact same fucking spot. So essentially, instead of heading to Ape City, Brent and New Nova head into what the apes refer to as the Forbidden Zone. Oh. Forbidden for the same reasons as
Nova saying New Nova not mean new?
Yep.
Does Nova mean new?
Pretty much. Okay. I think I don't know.
Nova Scotia, I'm pretty sure, is like New Scotland.
I have no fucking idea. Oh. Is that what Nova Scotia is? Yeah. Anyway, the Forbidden Zone was called the Forbidden Zone for the same reason as Chernobyl is called the Forbidden Zone. It was a site of an ancient nuclear disaster, ground zero for the detonation of a bomb that would essentially end civilization as we know it today. Now, according to this book, most of mankind were wiped out due to this atomic bomb disaster. What was left after the dust settled were two distinct types of humans. A grotesquely mutated but highly intelligent telepathic race of man who lived underground in the old subway lines and worshipped a still very live but undetonated atomic bomb which they called the Alpha and Omega.
So why would they worship something that had destroyed their world once already?
There's a reason people say they are good God-fearing men. Yeah. They worshipped it because of its power. This race was generally passive people in this book, you know?
Okay.
So they saw the bomb as their last line of defense if the apes ever tried to invade or eradicate them. That and some of these mutated men didn't see the blast as being all that bad. They may be horribly disfigured, but so was all man, and they gained superhuman brains from the mutation. Some even saw it as the planet cleansing itself of the undesirables and were happy to do it again with Alpha Omega if given the slightest provocation. That's how the book ends. The apes attacked the mutants, and the mutants set off another atomic bomb. Not just killing all living creatures in its direct vicinity, but this time destroying the whole planet, leaving nothing but floating chunks of Earth hurtling through the universe.
But, like, if they were going to die by setting off the atomic bomb anyway, why not take the chances fighting the apes?
Because they were passive, they didn't give a shit, they didn't really care the way they saw. I suppose if the first time it didn't destroy the entire world, it just kind of, like I said, cleansed everything in their eyes.
They were taking their chances.
It was just a case of fuck it, we'll cleanse the world again. They were willing to give up their lives to wipe out these apes, you know, and the hope that something else will grow afterwards.
Okay.
But
you said 2 types of humans survived the blast. The mutants, and I assume the mute animal-like humans that you spoke about in the first book.
Yeah.
So obviously the mutated telepaths came from the nuclear radiation, at least in the sci-fi land, but how did the other humans end up reverting back to the feral state?
Devolution of man brought on by Simian flu, which, yes, Zaius did predict in the 80s, but under very different circumstances. We're going to get into all that next with his travels, devolution theory, and the formation of the Church of Apeology. With the moderate success of his first 2 books, Zaius took a break away from science fiction to study and research something he believed to be science fact. While working at the newspaper, he met and eventually married a newly graduated journalist with big ambition by the name of Sienna Tang. Sienna had helped Zaius with his final few drafts of the Planet of the Apes books, and using her connections in France, her own country of origin, she got his book into the hands of the right people, securing her new husband a deal. Not getting to take a proper trip for their honeymoon when they were quietly married at City Hall in a private ceremony with just themselves and 2 witnesses, the couple used some of their newly acquired funds to take a round-the-world trip, Zaius using it as an opportunity for study and research.
If you as much as think about working on a honeymoon, I'll divorce you.
Yeah, and Zaius and Sienna were like 40 when Planet of the Apes was finally finished and released, so they'd been married for about 15 years at this stage.
It took them that long to get the job done.
Yeah, they reckon that's what drove his wild theories as time went on. He was just so consumed with his fantasy world and the wealth and the power of running a religion that he started to believe his own bullshit.
Christ.
On this trip, they travelled from New York to Paris to see some of Sienna's family. From there, they visited Amsterdam, Berlin, and London, all at the time spent in labs, libraries, and churches. After London, Sienna insisted on 2 weeks in sunny Spain with no work and no interruptions.
Not asking for much, like 2 weeks out of the whole trip.
After the break in Spain, they travelled to India and throughout Asia, where he studied their native religion practices and folklore before controversially spending some time in Russia, which was still the USSR at the time. In Russia, he studied fringe sciences, specifically those that focus on the human brain and mind.
You say controversially he went to Russia. I'm pretty sure he was held on house arrest for like 3 months after he returned from the USSR. Like, they did a whole background check and watched his every move for months, even after being released from house arrest. The Americans feared communism and anything Russian. That's why all the bad guys in Mel Gibson movies are Russian. Well, up until he made The Passion of the Christ.
To this day, no one is quite sure what led Zaius to believe this theory or how he even came across it, but the only thing we can guess is that it was a mix of a lot of fringe sciences and doing a lot of mental gymnastics to make himself believe that his own work of science fiction was actually prophecies given to him by a higher being as a warning for humanity. That's our fucking kid's phone. Kill him. But before he would go down the higher power route, first he wanted to try to legitimize his theories as science fact. And with that, he wrote the book Devolution Theory and the Destruction of the Human Mind. Zaius claimed that due to mass consumption of media, chemically enhanced food and automation of machines, man had allowed his brain to become soft, and that through time and evolution, the human brain would slowly shut itself down. In other words, the smarter our tech gets, the stupider we get. Evolution happens over millions of years to allow for a specimen or a species to adapt to its surroundings in a way to make it perform in the most efficient way and in order to ensure its survival. But in Zaius' theory, the process would only take thousands of years in the place of millions. And due to our place on the evolutionary ladder and the whole hunter-be-hunted thought process of the food chain, he claimed that as man devolved back to a feral animalistic state, apes, of which he had already begun training in the ways of man, would become woke and would in turn, over time, overtake mankind when it came to planetary supremacy.
I don't even know where to start with how wrong all that is.
Oh, don't worry. We'll explain it better later when we get into the next 3 books.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear how that is fleshed out.
Needless to say, every and all scientist, anthropologist, archaeologist, religious and political leader, and even theologist shit all over this theory, easily debunking it with a simple little thing called logic and real scientific research and findings. You know, actual
just
facts.
Just makey uppy stuff is what he's doing.
In fact, it was so hardly debunked that most bookstores refused to stock the book in its advised genre title of scientific research, and was almost always found in the sci-fi section if the store would even stock it at all. It wasn't a big seller and definitely not a page turner. I tried to skim over it but kept falling asleep on the first chapter.
So to the scientific community at this point, he's a joke.
Pretty much, yeah. And what do you do when science fails you? You turn to the gods. In this case, the god of the apes. The first recorded instance of Zaius mentioning the prospect of his own religion is in 1970 at a sci-fi convention where he was promoting his less popular Planet of the Apes sequel, Beneath the Planet of the Apes. During a Q&A with fans, Zaius was asked if there was much money in sci-fi writing, to which Zaius joked, not really. Writing for a penny a word is ridiculous. If a man really wants to make $1 million, the best way would be to start his own religion.
Yep.
Disillusioned by the lackluster response of Beneath the Planet of the Apes and the out-and-out loathing shown to him by the scientific world after the release of Devolution theory and the destruction of the human mind, Zaius refocused himself in on what he was now referring to as his prophecy texts. To be fair, I enjoyed these books for what they are as novels, and if he was a smart man, he would have probably, he could have lived off this concept for life, possibly spawning multiple movies, games, comics, cartoons, and maybe even a TV show.
Yep.
I mean, the stories themselves are entertaining. But it wasn't enough for Zaius, who just seemed to be digging himself deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. Then in 1970, something happened that launched 1,000 conspiracies and that Zaius would latch on to in 1971 as proof of his stories being prophecies and not mere sci-fi novels as they had to this point been classified.
Patreon is alive, alive, live, alive, live, alive. Patreon is alive, alive, horror podcast. Patreon is alive, alive, live, alive, live, alive. Patreon is alive, alive, horror podcast.
Hey kids, can't get enough of that blood, guts and gore? Then head on over to our Patreon, where for just $5 a month you'll get exclusive access to our true crime show Real Monsters and horrific history tales from Playing with Bones with Aimee Rose, along with early access to our minisodes and ad-free access to everything else. All this and loads more horror-tastic extras from the Horrorverse. So what are you waiting for? Permission? Go nick your parents' card today and subscribe now at patreon.com/It's Alive Alive Pod. Remember, that's It's Alive Alive Podcast, a really, really fake true crime horror podcast. It's Alive Alive, all the guts and gore with none of the guilt. As we spoke about last week, the space race was on in the 1960s, and that trend didn't slow after the moon landing in 1969.
By far, Kubrick's best film.
Dare you to say that to Buzz Aldrin.
Did not fuck her.
But yeah, they will tell you how much that'll tell you how much pressure was on the Soviet-US space race. The fact that some people believed that the US would rather fake the landing on a soundstage rather than lose to the Russians. Either way, in April 1970, Apollo 13 would be the launching pad for Zaius' religious propaganda.
Apollo 13 was the 7th crewed mission in the Apollo space program and the 3rd meant to land on the moon. The craft was launched from the Kennedy Space Center on April 11th, 1970, but the lunar landing was aborted after an oxygen tank in the service module ruptured 2 days into the mission, disabling its electrical and life support system. The crew, supported by backup systems on the lunar module, instead looped around the moon in a circumlunar trajectory and returned safely to Earth on April 17th. The mission was commanded by Jim Lovell, with Jack Swigert as command module pilot and Fred Hayes as lunar module pilot. Swigert was a late replacement for Ken Mattingly, who was grounded after exposure to rubella. A routine stir of an oxygen tank ignited damaged wire insulation inside it, causing an explosion that vented the contents of both of the SM's oxygen tanks into space. Without oxygen needed for breathing and for generating electric power, the service module's propulsion and life support systems could not operate. The command module system had to be shut down to conserve its remaining resources for re-entry, forcing the crew to transfer to the lunar module as a lifeboat. With the lunar landing cancelled, mission controllers worked to bring the crew home alive, and although the lunar module was designed to support 2 men on the lunar surface for 2 days, mission control in Houston improvised new procedures so it could support 3 men for 4 days. The crew experienced great hardship caused by the limited power, a chilly and wet cabin, and a shortage of potable water. There was critical need to adapt the command module's cartridges for the carbon dioxide scrubber system to work in the lunar module. The crew and mission controllers were successful in improvising a solution. The astronauts' peril briefly renewed public interest in the Apollo program, and tens of millions watched the splashdown in the South Pacific Ocean on television.
One of them being Dr. Ulysses Zaius. Now, days in space and sea in such circumstances would leave you looking a bit ratty and overgrown.
Mm-hmm.
The men with their messy hair and bearded faces looked almost unrecognisable in the 1970s news cameras as they were shot being saved from the ocean from a distance by journalists from media outlets across the world. It wasn't until later, when the men had been brought home, debriefed and cleaned up, did the media get their first real shot at the returning astronauts. All making sense and sounding logical so far, right?
Yep, this is all documented fact. You can see the footage on YouTube.
It's cool footage as well.
Oh,
I watched it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Zaius' next book, entitled Escape from the Planet of the Apes, said different, and would be the book to officially pivot his de-evolution theory from being fringe science to becoming divine prophecies from the future. Prophecies that could not be avoided and would see the rise of apes such as chimps, orangutans and gorillas as the master species of the planet over the now weak, low-numbered and divided man.
Calm down, Zaius.
In the book, he claimed that the apes from his original 2 books, Zira and Cornelius, took the astronaut Taylor's ship and with the help of the ape's greatest scientist, Dr. Milo, mended it and took off from Soror just before the planet was blown to pieces by the Alpha Omega bomb. He claimed that the apes were kept secret from mankind as the reality of our future in the universe would be too much for the human race to take and could lead to a rash of ape genocide. He stated that in secret CIA documents that he has claimed to have seen, that the female humanoid chimp by the name of Zira spent weeks, if not months, with special agents and some of the most powerful people in the world, including US President Richard Nixon, all tricky dicky. She told them the following: in the late 1980s, a virus brought from space would spread throughout the world and kill all the cats and dogs. Like, extinct, gone, no more doggos. This would be it. And that will be what he would refer to as the Simian flu.
So when you said he predicted the pandemic, you meant he got the name right. Like, they probably just named the latest virus after his dumb books because of the ape connection.
Probably. Still, though, that's not the only coincidence. Wait, you'll see.
Okay.
Anyway, not wanting to be without a pet, man turned to apes as replacements as they were quick and easy to train due to their heightened intelligence in comparison to their predecessors. Sorry, dogs. She said that a great ape by the name of, and I'll remind you, this is 1971 and 40 years before the Genesis outbreak, but the great ape by the name of Caesar would rise up and lead the apes in a revolution against the evil oppressor's man.
I don't know, being a pet doesn't seem all that bad. Like laying around napping, eating treats all day, getting pampered by your owner, and your only responsibility is to make sure you do your business outside and don't chew up shoes. Peace, piss.
Except that the apes did too well at being domesticated and trained, at least according to Zira. She told officials that man eventually began to use apes for menial work and hard labour, treating them as slaves rather than pets, and that with no rights and being just short of the intelligence needed to organise, the apes fell into their new position in civilization. It was this one ape, Caesar, who was born already woke, that would come and open the minds of the other apes. He would organise and assemble an army which would see the apes fight for rights and a life of their own. Now, where, you might ask, did this mysterious woke ape come from? Well, the book Escape explains that Cornelius and Zira were husband and wife, and since arriving on Earth, the ape Zira fell pregnant. This, to world officials, was a sign of the beginning of the end, because although Zira and Cornelius seemed to be kind and harmless beings, the possibility of them procreating after what Zira had told them about the apes in the future seemed too risky, and thinking of the future of mankind, they came to the conclusion that while Zira and Cornelius would be allowed to stay on Earth and originally were to be eventually introduced to the world at large, their offspring would not be allowed to live, and a forced abortion was sanctioned to take place, after which both apes would be fixed so as to ensure their attempts at procreation would be fruitless. See, these apes should have fucking crashed in the south.
Yeah.
Horrified, the apes Zira and Cornelius fled with the help of some human sympathizers and were hidden at the circus. But the net eventually closed in on them, and in a battle to protect the child, the apes were shot and killed along with the infant ape. But according to Zaius at the end of the book, it was his belief that the intelligent infant ape was swapped out with a regular infant ape at the circus by the ever-sly Zira, and so the origin for the Planet of the Apes was born, and the ape named Caesar lived on. So what do you think of that?
I think he's clutching at straws.
Huh?
I think he's clutching at straws. This is what I think.
Well, if you think that's a lot. So conquest for the planet and battle for the Planet of the Apes came after that, and they essentially fleshed out the story of Caesar, the great leader of apes. Conquest shows the apes in their time as slaves, and their eventual revolution and battle shows the aftermath and the beginning of Caesar's new civilization, where he had irrationally managed to teach all apes to talk and act like men within a generation. And in Caesar's vision for the future, man and ape would live together in peace, with ape holding certain rights over man as they were now the dominant species.
So did we try to nuke the apes and that's why we're all dead, mutant or feral?
Zaius never really elaborates on this fact. Just that sometime after the ape uprising, which was supposed to happen in 1991, men exploded an atomic bomb and it's supposed to have wiped us out.
So how did he weasel out of his 1991 doomsday prediction?
Well, it was the early days of him starting the Church of Apeology, and Zaius said he originally put the date down as the 90s to try and put a sense of urgency on the general public, as he felt they couldn't deal with the concept of his issue if he gave the real dates, which were a few hundred years away. You know, people wouldn't care. But he admitted himself it's impossible to put an exact date on the doomsday.
Nice way to backtrack out of the prophecy.
It worked because after the release of Battle, the church really started to kick off as Zaius targeted wealthy celebrities and rich nerds around the world to push his dogma forward and launch his teachings worldwide. Not through churches and sermons, but through the Church of Apeology research and information centres, and through both group lectures and one-on-one tutoring sessions with qualified apologist counsellors. The church grew so fast and had so many influential followers that within 7 years of its inception, it was granted tax-exempt status, essentially legitimizing its place in the world of organized religion. This all happened at a time where outsiders were only aware of the religion through the guise of the Planet of the Apes book series.
Yeah.
To learn more, you had to become a member and pay for years of lecturing and tutoring. Each level is marked by grades, grade 1, grade 2, and so on, and each grade comes at a price. Most who have joined and defected say that originally you're led to believe that the whole thing is a scientific self-help program that teaches you how to be happier, more well-adjusted person in the world, drowning in chaos. They originally are told that the Planet of the Apes is a metaphor for humankind in decline in morals and mental health across the planet. After years and years past, you're slowly indoctrinated into this cult and essentially brainwashed into believing that the Great Ape Uprising was inevitable and our money had to be pumped into research to finding the solution before doomsday.
So by the time you've realised you've been scammed, you're 20 years and hundreds of thousands down, so you're committed. I mean, most people would probably prefer to live in their bubble than be humiliated and admit they were made fools of. I mean, imagine that you've wasted your life and there's no way to get that time or money back. It must be absolutely sickening.
And it only gets worse as time progresses. If they feel hard done by this early on in the game, wait until Zaius goes right off the rails, or how crazy shit gets after his death and the real Simian flu hits us in 2019. So obviously Zaius was using the fear of nuclear war to get these people involved. From the moment the Americans dropped the first atomic bomb on Japan, the whole world was up in arms with the prospect of global annihilation. And although the Cold War officially ended in 1991, some would say that the Cold War still carries on to this day.
The Cold War was a period of geopolitical tension between the United States and the Soviet Union and their respective allies, the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc, that started in 1947, 2 years after the end of World War II, and lasted until 1991, the fall of the Soviet Union. The term Cold War is used because there was no large-scale fighting directly between the two superpowers, but they each supported opposing sides in major regional conflicts known as proxy wars.
How can I say that ended in 1991? As far as I can tell, it's ongoing, and will it not stay ongoing as long as nuclear warfare is a viable option and threat? I mean, I realised that when Russia invaded Ukraine, and although sanctions were brought against them, as it was very clear very early in the conflict that Europe and the United States had no intention of intervening in warfare with the Russians.
Yeah.
Also, the ongoing conflict in Israel and Palestine. The states support Israel, even if they say they don't agree with their methods and supply them with weapons and aid, while the Russians support Palestine. So it's not like after 1991 we suddenly had world peace.
Yeah.
At this point, the nuclear bomb's only good quality is it acts as a deterrent when it comes to the likelihood of another world war. We're basically in an international Mexican standoff at all times, with the thought process being Russia won't fire a nuke because America will fire one right back at them, and essentially the two of the world superpowers would be destroyed by each other.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, we got a lunatic in North Korea trying everything he can to develop nuclear weapons, even though he's been told not to. And if he manages to get that going, he couldn't give two shits about nuclear disaster. He'll fire off anyway. So no matter what we do, it seems like man is kind of destined to destroy itself. Something that Zaius was also well aware of and was happy to profit off of. Now, this is where it gets super crazy, but remember, this is a religious belief system, so not everything has to be based in hard facts, since faith will, always play a part in these cults.
Yeah.
So, like this one. Okay. So here we go. Zaius claimed that the books of his Planet of the Apes series were prophecies of the future, not the work of science fiction which they had originally been marketed as. He said that after the simian flu killed all our pets, I was about to say all our enemies. All our enemies. After the simian flu killed all our pets, the apes would be given more opportunity to learn and eventually rise up. In the years after the uprising, man would become sick too, and during this global pandemic, frustrations between countries on how to deal with the growing plague and the ongoing attacks from the now militant apes would eventually find men turning their guns, or in this case, bombs, on each other, decimating the world's population, leaving only freaks and feral animals behind. He stated that the freaks or mutants would be formed from the nuclear fallout, while the feral, the devolved man would be caused by the sickness that would consume all that was left. He claimed that the original story was a message sent through space and time as a warning, and he framed the story as apes finding a message in a bottle to really hit home the reality of our future and the place of man in it.
Would a nuclear fallout would a nuclear explosion not kill off germs as well?
I have no idea.
Don't they just say the cockroaches are the only living thing?
Yeah, and according to Family Guy, Twinkies.
And sure. And sure.
Anyway, even with this first book and this first prophecy and this first warning, he claimed in the future we were still destined to destroy the world with the Alpha Omega bomb in a final battle for the Planet of the Apes in his sequel. Zaius, in a strange move, named his movement after the enemy of said religion in Apeology. See, he didn't really worship apes. He and his followers wanted them, eventually he wanted them all destroyed before the day came that they overthrew men. But he did believe that first they needed to be locked up and studied in an effort to save humanity and see what it was about the ape brain that could not just withstand the simian flu but thrive off it.
Okay.
He believed by unlocking this power that maybe humans could ascend to the telepathic superhumans depicted in his book, and using this superhuman intelligence, finally put an end to the human conflict and see that no more intelligent men destroy all nuclear weapons and live in peace and harmony.
At least his end goal was commendable.
A front for what he really wanted.
Which was?
Ultimate power and immortality.
Yeah, not asking for much, is he?
You see, Zaius really bought into his own bullshit. Well, most of it anyway. And while other cult leaders used their success as leaders to put more notches on the bedpost, Zaius followers and their practices, while in no way sexual, except in one instance, were still just as dangerous.
What was the one sex act?
Oh, Zaius got the bright idea to try and make ape-human hybrids, and a mating experiment was tried out for a few months.
Oh, that's not one sex act. That's a few months of sex act.
Yeah, fair enough. I think what I was trying to point out is that Apeology isn't a sex cult like other cults. They were recognized as a religion officially by the government. This was just one instance of sex being a focal point of the religion, and it was in their minds for scientific reasons. From what defectors have said, very few people were happy about the whole affair, but they were bound by the word of the lawgiver.
Was there not a chimpanzee, what was purported to be a chimpanzee-human hybrid at one point in time in the 20th century? Give me a look in just 2 seconds.
I have never heard of this,
Yeah.
and I thought I would have come across it in this kind of a scenario.
I'm
You
almost
don't want to look
certain.
up monkey man sex hybrids.
Oliver the Human Z.
What?
Sorry, yeah, Oliver the Human Z is what they're now. They're pretty
Humanzy? This can't be real.
No,
Is that
I'm
human
telling you,
dude?
I'm telling you. I'm pretty sure it's been debunked, but this guy, it's his face. He kind of reminds you, so Oliver was a performing chimpanzee once promoted to as a missing link or human Z due to his somewhat human-like appearance and a tendency to walk upright. Despite his somewhat unusual appearance and behavior, scientists found that Oliver was not a human-chimpanzee hybrid, obviously. But what I'm saying is this guy was purported to have been just the way he looks. But he was found in the Congo.
Weird kind of face.
I wonder was he picked on in the wild, kind of looking for a bit different.
And what, they thought like someone went out and rode a fucking chimpanzee and this is what came up?
Yeah. And in 1996, he was housed by the Berkshire Corporation, and there was a geneticist from the University of Chicago and tested portions of his DNA.
What years was this?
In 1996, he was still alive. He died in he was born in 1957, and he died in 2012.
Maybe Oliver came from this fucking program.
Maybe.
Zaius convinced himself that the next evolutionary step resided deep within the brain of the ape, and that he had to unlock that knowledge and power before the doomsday clock hit midnight. Trust me, though, the sex program was the least of what happened within Zaius' religion. Now, I should say at this point, before I get into the allegations, none of this is the church's official stance. They claim to worship the ape. They claim that it's their life mission to ensure that all of ape live in luxury and that they be treated with respect in the hope that, they allow us to live alongside them when the apes take over the world. Similar to the story of Zaius' last book, Battle for the Planet of the Apes, in which man and ape live side by side, but apes held slightly more rights than man.
Okay.
Essentially, because of our time using them as slaves, man did not have the right to say no to an ape under any circumstances, and man could not hold any political position, essentially making the apes our overlords.
This shit is ridiculous. So what did they do to make the apes' lives more luxurious?
Publicly, they made the church look more like an animal rescue and haven, so setting up multiple sanctuaries around the world, all dedicated to apes. To be fair to them, a lot of good was done by these sanctuaries, and a lot of apes lived very comfortably, and I truly believe it's because Zaius believed his own words. And that what they pushed out to the public as being their dogma was in fact a small part of it. I think the sanctuaries were backup plans for if civilization fell and men really did have to ingratiate themselves to the new master species.
Batshit crazy.
You ain't heard nothing yet. The way Dr. Zaius saw it, the apes who lived in these sanctuaries would be the ancestors of the master apes, and that once they unlocked their consciousness, they would also clear the way for ancestral memories, so they would remember the kindness of the apeologists and in turn return the kindness and maybe even carry on his religion as their own official belief system.
But that makes Zaius a prophet to the apes. Like, would ape Jesus be a human man?
Who the fuck knows? I've said it once, I'll say it a million times, trying to make sense of the senseless, so moving it on.
You said the apes in the sanctuary would be the master apes' ancestors, implying that they were a different group of apes that were not destined to be ancestors.
And those apes could be found on Zaius' private island off New York, officially named Kalima Island, affectionately known as Ape Island by the media and public, but known as the Forbidden Zone by most of Apeologist followers.
Why the Forbidden Zone?
Kalima Island was the head office and essentially the Vatican City of Apeology. Only authorized personnel were allowed on the island, and the way the buildings were sectioned off and secured, even if you worked there, you'd only ever see your section of the building. Your department was located, that area you worked in. Like, you get off a ferry in the morning, and you go to your department's gate and your ID card would only clear you for that part of the island.
Okay.
This was to ensure that no one outside of Zaius and a handful of top-level apeologists ever really knew what was going on in a grand scale. essentially protecting Zaius from informants, because outside of his few trusted advisors, everything was so compartmentalized that, it looked, individually the task looked harmless, they looked innocent, each step seemed innocent, but it was only when you put all the pieces together that, the true picture started to form.
Okay, it's honesty time. We have a confession to make. We suck at socials, no good at Insta, can't send a tweet or an X or whatever that super villain looking motherfucker is calling it now. Stick to your space cars, Elon. But we know you want to chat, you want to be kept updated, you want to be alive all the goddamn time, so we're getting down from the antisocial soapbox and giving this a try. So come chat to us on Insta and Twitter at AliveAlivePod, or hit us up by email at itsalivealivepod@gmail.com. We want to hear from you. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. This is a project, it's still a work in progress, and we just want to give you more what you like and less of what you can't stand. So give us a like, give us a follow, we'll always hit you back, and we'll always try to reply to everyone. So come say hi. We don't bite. Well, at least Aimee doesn't. And she keeps me well fed, so you got nothing to worry about. Now, back to the show.
So what was really going on around Ape Island?
To tell you that, we have to get into Zaius' private life a little bit. So we established earlier that success didn't really come to Zaius until he was in his 40s. And that is all that had consumed his life up until that point. So much so that he and his wife Sienna had put off starting a family. They put it on the back burner, although it was something Sienna had really wanted. So as the years passed, she began to grow a little resentful towards Zaius for not giving her the family he had promised when they married. Now, I can't stress enough that unlike other church leaders, I have not heard anything negative about Dr. Zaius in the way of sexual misconduct.
Except the monkey fucking.
Except the monkey fucking, right.
Yeah.
It's believed by many that he truly loved and adored his wife, giving her everything she ever wanted.
Except for a baby.
Except for a baby. But while he couldn't unfuck the monkeys, he could provide Sienna with the family she craved. So, by using a surrogate mother, the Zaiuses had a daughter in 1975 when they were 52 years old, and they named her Valentina.
And was a surrogate and apologist.
Oh yeah, they were queuing up for the right to carry the defender of the faith's child.
Ew.
There was an extensive psychological and health test, interviewing and family backgrounds. So Sienna got what she wanted, but the joy would be short-lived as she would pass away in 1980 from breast cancer, leaving behind Zaius, now 57, the lone parent of a 5-year-old girl.
Oh, that's sad.
The worst part is that she probably would have been saved if she could have seen a doctor earlier. She found the lump months before she went to get it tested.
And why did she hold off so long?
Well, a big part of Apeology is preparing for the next world, where modern civilization will cease to exist, and under the rule of the apes, we'll find ourselves without electricity or other modern comforts, as they will be seen by the still developing ape civilization as man-made magic. So when you officially sign into Apeology, or when you're confirmed into the religion similar to the way you are in Catholicism, you sign a contract. This contract essentially signs all your rights over to the religion. You legally agree to settle all disputes within the tribe of the church, keeping police and government out of church business. You must agree to only seek medical care under the most severest of circumstances, like when it's genuinely life-threatening. Reason being, there is no hospitals or medicine in the jungle, and the apes will take years mastering our biology. So you need to get used to weathering the storm when it comes to illnesses. In this contract, you also agree to give 50% of all your income to the church, answering the question I'm sure many of you had about how Zaius could afford all this. And while the following was tops 500,000 worldwide, half of all that income can really build up. Especially when a handful of your followers are major celebrities bringing in multi-millions of dollars each year from their latest box office smash or their many, many endorsement deals. You actually signed 2 documents, one that gave them all the above mentioned stipulations, which is ironclad and legally binding, and one which gave over your afterlife soul to the apes too.
So she didn't get a breast exam after finding a lump because there's a possibility that in hundreds of thousands of years we might have to live in the jungle and there's no breast exams in the jungle. Like, that's what you're telling me.
Yep.
Did she not understand that the average human lifespan is like your 80s, and even then in the 70s it was probably a bit lower than that?
True, but she also believed her husband's shit, and she knew more than anybody else. She knew there was a possibility she could be around for this future if her husband's experiments worked.
So you're saying she was gullible?
More like brainwashed by her husband's teachings.
Her and a few 100,000 more.
Yep. But that would all start falling apart on him in the early 90s. Whistleblowers and later an investigation into what was going on Kalama Island would unearth some shocking experiments. Zaius was conducting not just different types of educational and training techniques on specially selected apes he had at the Forbidden Zone, but he was also doing dissections and brain surgeries on the beasts. He performed these experiments sometimes without the aid of anesthesia, being too cheap to pay out for the good stuff, and often opened apes up multiple times in short spaces of time, rummaging around their guts like an old lady looking for her keys in her handbag. Neuroscience and brain dissection seemed to be of most interest to him. He believed the secrets of superhuman abilities were buried somewhere deep in the ape's mind. He started to believe that whatever elevated the mutants' intelligence must be the same thing that elevated the apes, and became obsessed with unlocking that secret.
He's like a mad scientist. I mean, listen to the story. He is a very, very mentally unwell man.
Oh, a very, very mentally unwell man with power and money. It's 2024 now. We have had loads of them. They're like all over the place.
Everywhere.
Zuckerberg, fucking. You should be used to them by now. I mean, they're running everything.
True.
Now, dissecting and experimenting on apes is one thing, and the animal abuse here is appalling. But what Zaius did next to, and I can't stress enough, did to willing participants, is what takes this case from animal abuse to mental and physical abuse of a human. To compare his notes of the ape's brain with our own, Zaius decided he needed to get in to have a look around the human brain.
Yeah.
You can't know if you don't check them both, you know? At first, he used that of dead followers who were willing to donate, but as that process proved too slow due to their low follow numbers, eventually the call was put out for live and willing test subjects. Ever eager to impress the defender of the faith, again, the applications were plenty. And Zaius performed acts on live human test subjects that will put Dr. Herbert West to shame.
Yeah, well, given what you told me about him, it doesn't surprise me one bit.
Although most records were destroyed before police and FBI could execute search warrants on Kalama Island, it's suspected that at least some of the test subjects died and most were left with some form of serious brain damage. Obviously,
yeah.
This attack on the Forbidden Zone by the US government and what the incurring investigation would unearth really hit the budding religion hard, losing more than half of their followers within the first year of the scandal and another quarter since then. You might not believe it, but this was seen as a popular church. It was really on the upswing for years, and although some people always had a funny feeling about them, no one really knew the degree of the damage being done by Dr. Zaius' madness. Their public image with the worldwide sanctuaries was impeccable, despite the fact that their leader said crazy shit about monkeys, and his predictions for thousands of years. All of his predictions for thousands of years in the future. So what damage could he do in his own lifetime? That's the way they were looking at it.
Yeah.
Turns out a hell of a lot judging off his heir's action in the future.
So Valentina followed in her dad's delusional footsteps.
Nope, her and her husband Vitus were the whistleblowers. It will be McCullough, who we will get into more next week, that will be the heir to the Apeology crown. Okay. Valentina was obviously born in and raised in Apeology. It was all she had known all her life. Especially after the death of her mother, she was constantly surrounded by her own kind and kept in the bubble that was the Apeology universe. She spent the vast majority of her early years on Ape Island, only leaving Kalama once or twice a year to accompany her father on lecture tours of various Apeology-sanctioned sanctuaries. Now, Valentina always admitted she found the stories her father told of Caesar and the master ape species a bit far-fetched, but then again, so are the stories of nearly every religious mythos. So she decided to look at it for what it was, a warning story for mankind, to get the average man to understand that war was not the answer and to respect our fellow creatures and surroundings. She generally dodged questions from the press for years when it came to the dogma of apeology, always opting to lean into the work done in the various ape sanctuaries they ran across the world. This little detail didn't go unnoticed by her father, who in turn appointed her as CEO in Ape Sanctuary Department. Basically, anything good done by apeologists were done through and spearheaded by Valentina Zaius.
Okay, so as in she had good intentions.
Yeah. Zaius knew she was just basically a fucking animal.
Yeah.
Zaius knew he would need a man with his own level of drive and commitment to the cause to take his place after he was gone, an eventuality they had been preparing for since the 80s. Zaius wasn't exactly the healthiest guy. He was no stranger to the Golden Arches, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That's why he handpicked, groomed, and commanded John Wesley McCullough, instructing him on every action and eventuality that he must take and make her upon and after his passing from this plane to the next. That's a mouthful.
Was Valentina pissed she passed over for the top spot in Apeology?
Not really. Like I said, she had no interest in the religious aspect. She was really just an animal nutting activist and kind of remained so for the rest of her days.
So what led her to defecting from her father's church?
A good question. And one I'll answer next week in the Simian flu pandemic and Devolution theory part 3. Along with that, we'll talk about Zaius' legal problems, the effects they had on Apeology as a whole, and the church's way of dealing with Zaius' eventual death. All that, and we talk more about Zaius' successor as lawgiver, as the defender of the faith, because he becomes a lawgiver, and that will be former Colonel John Wesley McCullough and the Doomsday Militia Army he led into the woods of San Francisco in search of woke apes, and the siege that followed and essentially put the final nail in the coffin of Apeology.
Until then, you know what to do. Follow us on socials at Alive Alive Pod and check out our Patreon at It's Alive Alive Pod for great shows like our Mini Monsters companion show, Real Monsters, with my Great Horrific History podcast, Playing with Bones, along with the classic episodes of Behind the Mask and classic Real Monsters, along with early access to the whole week's Mini Monsters every Monday.
All that, and you get ad-free access to our main show and the weekend update, all for just $5 a month. That's on Patreon at It's Alive Alive Pod.
And now the first 7 days are free, so it costs you nothing to go check it out.
We'll be back next Wednesday with more tales from the Horrorverse. It's Alive Alive Podcast, all the guts and gore with none of the guilt. See you all next time. Same Alive Alive time, same Horrorverse channel. Okay, love you, bye-bye.